Saving our kids, many call this the plight of parenthood, is raising our children in a community where they start out at disadvantage, or is that just a perception? We'll wrap our conversation with three parents and educators around this. And Dr. Una Clarke will also be joining me to discuss many of the issues plaguing our community and what she and her political organization are doing to change and strengthen the borough of Brooklyn. Also in this program, you'll be hearing from Shanisha Fletcher. But we begin by talking about kids and what their parents are doing, or are not doing, or should be doing. My guests are Dennis Boyd, author and educational consultant, who recently launched the Mothers with Sons initiative geared towards empowering mothers to navigate and carve out productive relationships with their developing adolescent sons. Nicole Wright, a parent of two children who are in high school and another who has gone off to McGill University. And Natalie Cousins, a parent of a teenager who is in high school. We begin by talking about our kids and what their parents are doing, or are not doing, or should be doing. My guests are Dennis Boyd, author and educational consultant, who recently launched the Mothers with Sons initiative, geared towards the empowering of mothers to navigate and carve out productive relationships with their developing adolescent sons. Nicole Wright, a parent of two children who are in high school and another who has gone off to McGill University. And Natalie Cousins, who is a parent of a teenager who is in high school, and I'm sure she's got a lot to say. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you for having us.
I began this program by saying that many people call saving our kids the plight of parenthood. Do you agree? And let us begin, first of all, with Nicole.
I don't see it as a plight. I see it more as the charge that we've been given as parents. And we are here just to guide them, nurture them as best, and just help them towards accomplishing goals. That's been always my view of.
Natalie?
Well, yeah, I don't see it as a plight. It's not a negative thing at all. We should always be looking to help our young people, whether it's our own children that we birth or children that we adopt by, our community, the kids on the block or at our church. So we should always be looking to help them because they in turn are going to help us in the future.
Dennis?
Well, in my experience in talking with parents, coaching with parents, it's a delicate balance because the funny thing is that kids don't come with instruction manuals. And it's something that takes a delicate balance, and a lot of parents need support in rearing their kids, especially as it relates to educating their kids, because parents have to work and they still have to do the things at home as parents, but still make the investment in their child's education so that they thrive.
What do you see as your responsibility of a parent, as a parent?
Definitely. It depends on the stage or the age of your child. In the beginning of their life, you definitely have to instruct them and really be protective and oversee everything that they do. So you give them a good foundation in terms of interacting with other people, about respect and so on. But as they get to be teenagers, older kids and teenagers, it's more of a guidance role. You have to begin to loosen the reins a little bit, let them explore, and then be able to correct them when they misstep. And as they get older into adulthood, then you're able to back off and say, okay, spread your wings and fly.
I was nodding my head because everything she was saying I totally agree with. I will add at the teen age that as much as we want to give them some reins, we also want to define boundaries and be consistent when we're reinforcing those boundaries so that they understand that, yes, we want you to develop and grow, but we also understand that there are consequences, to certain behavior.
Do you think parents are setting boundaries? Honestly.
From my observation, they're attempting to set boundaries. When I speak to adolescents specifically, one of the things that they really highlight is that the boundaries and the parents or the adults in their lives are usually inconsistent. So today, I'm accountable for not doing the dishes or doing my chores because you had a bad day at work. Tomorrow, because you had a good day at work, I'm not held accountable. And the same thing happens in school as well. So one of the top 2 to 3 complaints that the adolescents are bringing to my attention is that the adults are inconsistent.
Ooh.
That's actually, I
Please.
think that's interesting that the young people are saying that, because I agree. We do become inconsistent, but not only, from day to day because of our own feelings, but I think it's also because, we're afraid to enforce the boundaries that we ourselves set. So if they do break the boundaries, not just saying today they're accountable, but saying, okay, your responsibility was to do this, and the consequence of not doing this is something that actually makes you feel it. And it doesn't always happen, because we're actually hurting when we see our kids suffer, whether you have to take away their games or you got to do whatever you got to do, we kind of hurt. So we're not very good at enforcing our own boundaries that we set.
Yes, I agree with that as well. We're all in compliance with each other, but finding the thing that your kid is really going to react to and not behave that way is a challenge. And as you have teenagers, the things that are really important to them is their social life. So if they no longer have the opportunity to have this social life, you can use that to your best. And yes, there is the issue of being consistent. Parents are working, they're coming home, they're tired, they're dealing, like you said, with all the other stressors. But it's saying, okay, today I was not as firm as I should be, but it's a work in progress.
And the other thing that is important, and again, I do not speak from the perspective of being a parent. I'm not a parent yet.
But you work with parents.
I work with parents, I work with adolescents. And the other thing that I've noticed is that we used to say it takes a village to raise a child. And now there's no village. So we have great parents who may or may not be criticizing themselves behind closed doors quietly and questioning their ability to parent, because there is no community to support them. And when you see, so there's research that says that adolescents specifically need consistency in 3 environments: at home, in school, and in their social environments, what the things that they're doing recreationally that are reinforcing the values that they're taught at home. So
Good.
that's where the community and the village comes into place to pick up the slack and to hold the child or the adolescent accountable in those environments. So if Miss Jones knows that Miss Natalie doesn't tolerate profanity, if she sees her daughter in the hallway using profanity, she'll say, listen, your mother and I had a conversation and we know that you don't use profanity at home. Now she knows that, okay, Miss Jones is going to report this to my mother, so I
Right.
need to reel myself in. So it's providing that accountability everywhere that they're going, that are reinforcing the values that are taking place and being instilled at home, that is so critical and vital to the development and growth of adolescents.
You used the word fear earlier. Sometimes parents are afraid to establish the fact that their boss and what they say must be done.
Yeah.
But could some members of this quote-unquote village be also afraid to tell on the kid?
I am definitely in agreement that people are afraid to talk to the young people, because if I don't know this child or their parents let's say in a family setting or something like that, but I see them doing something wrong, if I say something to them, they may respond in a way that I don't like, right, which would be, they're disrespectful in some sort of way. And I've seen it on the train, people see it all the time. And they're afraid. And we've seen it even in the news where it goes to the extreme where they'll gang up on someone and beat them up. So you have this fear mentality coming in with people seeing a situation and not being able to speak to it, even though they know in the long run it's going to be detrimental to that young person. So, yeah, I agree that there's a lot of fear there.
Nicole, you agree?
Yes, there is a lot of fear there. I mean, we see the kids all the time, like as you said, and the behavior is not what anyone would want them to do. And depending on the age of the kids, you're not going to correct them or speak to them because of what we see in the media and how our kids are portrayed. So
The media. The media.
So we're getting the sound bites and the news flashes.
But how do you control your kids' use of the media? Do you as a parent?
Not specifically. There's certain things. The good part of my house, we have one television, and it's the family TV. Nobody has, actually, I'm not, that's not true. My daughter does not have a TV in her room.
Yes.
So that way I can control what she sees or doesn't see on the television. However, I can't control what she sees on the internet. But what I do with her is I talk to her about things, and I ask her, so what she's developed for me, and I'm not sure she's showing me everything she sees, but what she does is she'll come and show me what she was looking at on her YouTube channel or something like that. So we'll laugh about it or talk about it, and we'll share in that way. So I kind of step into her world of media and social media to try to keep up to date with what she's seeing and what she's experiencing online.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do the same. I have 3 girls, and they're close, and I became more social media savvy because I have 3 girls, and I wanted to know what are the things that are influencing them visually, as women of color in our society. And, so that helps bring up talking points that we can talk about, so it's interesting that the representations are one way. Like, what do you think about that? Because I try and get them to think about what it is that they're looking and processing, because they may not even realize what you're feeding yourself, what messages you're feeding yourself, and you start to believe as truth as to who you are as an individual and as a woman. So the social media thing is huge, and I think the communication and having more open discussions with our children.
That's good.
And
key.
there are so many parents who are ignorant about the social media. They do not know how to process any of this information. They don't know the technology. What's the disadvantage of parents not knowing the technology, not being able to keep an eye on what their kids are doing?
Oh, it can be to their child's detriment, because that means that there are things and potential people influencing their child from outside the home that they are totally in the dark about. So one of the things that has come up with some of the young people that I've worked with is pornography. There was a school that I was working with, and a young man was sitting at the desk, and I asked him what was he looking at, and it turned out that he was watching pornography, and he was in the 7th grade. So his mother was informed, and I had suggested and highly recommended that she discontinue his data plan on his phone, because then it makes him have to work to get it. But when they're exposed to something that early in life, it then begins to be the metric by which they gauge human interactions.
Yes.
And it helps them develop unrealistic and expectations that are going to be to their detriment if they want to be married. If he came home with my daughter, I'd be a little uptight. And it's our children are vulnerable when parents aren't savvy and at least in tune with what's going on, especially as it relates to social media, when they have these smartphones and other devices and apps of all sorts. It's really, I urge parents to really be engaged with their children as it relates to social media, who their friends are. Because if your friend is on a social media site, the natural curiosity of teenagers, they're exposing one another, and we don't know what's going on in the neighbor's home, because in a lot of cases we're not talking to our neighbor.
Yeah, I was thinking that it's almost like the parent is not able to speak a language. So they're speaking a language around you with their shortcuts in their texting and everything else, or even when they're in the same room speaking verbally to one another, and you are completely left in the dark. You have no idea what they're talking about. Sometimes they're talking about their own parent, that their parent may be annoying them or something's happening, and the parent is completely oblivious. So it puts the parent at the disadvantage as well, not just the child, because the parent can't correct certain behaviors. It's also their friends see them and perceive them in a different light that may not be for the parents' best, because now they can't speak to these young people coming into their home. Because I look at it this way: anytime I have any of my daughter's friends over, I become their parent for that time frame.
Yes.
And I have told their parents that, and their parents agree completely. That's it. If she gets out of line or he gets out of line, please discipline them, let them know, and then let me know. But I've built that relationship with those parents. So
We've got about 2 minutes left. Unfortunately, we're going to have a part 2 of this, and we're going to have this part 2 very, very soon, and I want you back. There are these statistics on the Department of Education's website that shows how Asian kids and white kids are outperforming, and I mean outperforming, our black kids. And we hear people say that one of the reasons is that people in some neighborhoods don't set priorities for their kids. What's your response to that?
I've read a lot of research on that, and I grew up in a very diverse community. So the reality is, as the data suggests, it's priorities, it's the values that start at home. Education doesn't start at school. The first educator are the parents, but it does start in the home.
Yes,
Nico.
I agree with that. And then also the other part too is that some parents became parents without having been parented themselves. So they don't really have a baseline from which to even begin. So it does present its challenges.
Natalie, last word from you, and you've got less than a minute.
Oh, well, it's really up to the parents to enforce the priorities, like you said. If they're not doing
Set and enforce what they've set.
Oh, absolutely, set and enforce them, because you just send them to school, but not telling them, okay, then you have to have a certain grade to be able to get this privilege or that privilege. It really doesn't mean anything to the young person. So yes, we have to do that.
I want to thank you for being on Brooklyn 45. We should have dedicated an entire half hour to this. We're going to come back and we're going to dedicate an entire half hour to this discussion. And we are also going to be asking our parents who are watching this program and our kids who are watching this program to send in their thoughts, the things that they would like to have discussed, and send it to us on our Facebook page, Brooklyn 45 TV on our Facebook page. Thank you so much for being our guest on Brooklyn 45. Now to my guest whose name is familiar to hundreds of thousands in Brooklyn. Dr. Una Clarke, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you so very much.
You just received an award that everyone is talking about from Mayor de Blasio. What is this award?
It was naming September 8th in my name and my honor as a Caribbean American for Caribbean Heritage Month, and following the carnival, when we put on the big show on Eastern Parkway. The day following was an event at BAM, and I was given the honor of being Caribbean Woman of the Year, with the 8th being, September 8th being Una Clarke's Day.
Is that
in the
this
city
year
of New
or
York.
every year?
I hope it's every year.
I hope it's every year too.
I hope it's every year, but I'll take it for this year and see what happens next year.
Sure. You talked about the big event, and lots of people are calling for an end to the big event, the end of Juve, the end of Carnival. What is your take on that?
It's not going to happen. So whoever is wishing it's going to end and that it won't happen, they can just forget it. If you ask about, are there ways in which we can improve the carnival, we can make sure that you can't ever say that everything is going to be safe. 2 days, just this week, 3 people were killed in a housing project. You can't say what's going to happen. Crime is crime, and it should not be associated with carnival in any way or form, because crime happens every day, because it happens in the area in which there is carnival, and because the person associated with it was a Caribbean American. You can't say it's really because of carnival or it's a part of carnival. And I resent that, because if somebody was murdered in the Bronx, would they say it's a part of carnival? If somebody was murdered in Brownsville, would they say it's a part of carnival? So that the fact that it's within the parameters of where carnival took place, it should never be associated with Caribbean carnival at all.
Brooklyn is the new Brooklyn for hundreds of thousands of people who seem to be moving in. And it's also a goodbye to neighborhoods for people who have been born here and grew up here. Our changing landscape. What do you have to say about that?
I think that when I came and lived in East Flatbush, Crown Heights, it was being known as a Caribbean community, and people were encouraging all the whites who lived in that neighborhood to move because we were coming. Now that they're coming back, what should I be saying? Because now everybody understands the quality of the housing that was there. The fact is that it is Caribbean Americans who did their 2 jobs and 3 jobs that bought those properties, came home from work, improved those properties that they're now being able to sell for $1.5 million, $800,000, $750,000. So we should never, ever cut ourselves short, especially those of Caribbean heritage who've come to live. We are now 1st, 2nd, and 3rd generation living in these neighborhoods. The one thing we haven't done well is to educate our children that our property is their heritage. And so many of our children go to college and don't come back. And so as elderly people, we're left with the property. Many of us don't remember that once you finish paying your mortgage, you have to pay your taxes, you have to pay your water rates. And those who are gullible and craven, as I call it, look at the property, see that there is some lack of payment on it, and they're ready to put you out of your property without saying to you, you owe taxes, you owe water rate, and your property is worth $750,000 and you owe $10,000. Why should somebody lose their property for $10,000? So it is, for me, a scheme. For me, it is a way in which gentrification takes place. No education of what's happening in the community so that people are not aware that they could lose their property if they don't pay their taxes once they're finished paying their mortgage.
How do we get this information to people, especially people who, you said earlier, they're not leaving their real estate to those who come after them, their sons, their daughters, their grandchildren?
That is because we have not educated our sons, our daughters, and our grandchildren that real estate is the real inheritance that they can have, that money can go, but real estate is always going to be there. The fact that we see it as shelter, and many of us from the Caribbean, and I can talk about my own so nobody can feel hurt by what I say, is that many of us feel we're going back home, so we find ourselves a new home while we live here. Our children go off to Harvard, Yale, or wherever they go to college. They don't come back, and we are left with the property, and we don't understand what a living will is, how we pass on our real estate to our children and our grandchildren as a heritage.
There are people who are saying that this changing of Brooklyn is by design.
Everything is by design. Everything is by design. It's by city planning. It's by the way in which people see the movement of other people. Some move in, some move out. It was good when we moved in. Now that we're moving out, other people are moving in. The same property that we bought and had to improve, somebody's coming to buy from under us right now. And like I said to people all the time, I know the people in my block who did 2 jobs to buy a house for $28,500, $35,000, and they came home from work at night. They repaired their basement. They made new apartments. They got the buildings department to come in and to certify the work that they did, and they were living comfortable. Now that the children are grown and have left, they are left with the property, and because they're left with the property, many of them sell their property, and so they get pushed out little by little.
I want to talk about your political organization, but before I do that, congratulations on being named to the CUNY board.
Thank you so very much. I hope that my life experience as an educator and as one who understands that education is the only way to become a middle class, I am just rearing, and I'm really enthusiastic, and I promised the mayor that I will do him justice.
Good. There's a lot to be talked about CUNY, but we'll invite you back once you have settled into being a member of the board.
Thank you so very much. But I'm excited and being named by our mayor.
You should be.
To be a voice and a face for him on the trusteeship of CUNY.
Yes.
And I promise him that I will give it my best shot. I'm an educator by profession and a politician by choice, so I think the combination of both will yield him something.
Let's talk about the politician by profession. We have elections coming up. What is your organization doing to ensure that people understand what is happening in this political process and what they ought to be doing and the benefits of getting involved by voting?
The primary for Congress is in June, and as you know, my daughter is a member of Congress, and I want to make sure that the community understands that she made a vote that that some people see as being controversial. We saw it as a vote for peace in the Middle East, so that I understand that some folks are looking for somebody to run against her because she didn't vote for Israel, but she voted her conscience. She voted what she was taught at home, that peace, and that her values as a Christian had to override every other aspect of what she may do politically. She has to remember that her home and her family is her anchor, and she's better off not being in office than to sell her values and the things that I have taught her as an elected official. Everybody have a room, and we think that we need to do what is right by each other, but there are times when you have to say no because it's not a part of your own Christian values.
And you've been very successful in responding internally to your own Christian values and doing what you consider to be right.
I do
and
what
not always
I do.
Politically correct.
I don't have to do politics. I have to remember that beyond politics, I have to answer to a higher calling, and my higher calling is that of my own values.
Dr. Una Clarke, thank you very much for being our guest on Brooklyn 45. You look great.
Oh, thank you very much indeed, and I feel great. You know, the greatest thing is that you have good health, that you have a clean and pure heart, and that you're willing to uplift those who are less fortunate than yourself, and that is my motto. You look down and you pick somebody else up, and you carry them along with you.
Great. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure indeed. Professor Taitt.
Yes, well, they call me that sometimes.
Sounds good.
And now to one of my students, Shanisha Fletcher.
If you have a child or know a child who is in high school or middle school in Brooklyn and has an average of 90 or above, that child can share their story here on Brooklyn 45. That child may be in your home, in your church, or living on your block. Send us information about them and how to contact them at info@brooklyn45.com. That's info@brooklyn45.com. In the subject line, put Young Academic Achiever, and we'll be in touch with you, their parent, their church, or their school. This is Brooklyn 45. Please watch our other programs on YouTube or like us on Facebook. I'm Shanisha Fletcher.